I'm going to start the recording, which is maybe the first time in all 5 weeks I've actually remembered to do it.
I was just going to remind you.
So I'm happy to have Craig Lane, who's chair of the Norwich Conservation Commission, and Bree Swenson from Norwich Rec here tonight. When I first began thinking about what history I might share with you tonight that connects to foraging, Craig suggested I'd look for any related Abenaki items we might have in our collection. But we don't actually have anything in our collection related to Abenaki culture in the traditional sense. But in thinking about it, I realized that we are all living on Abenaki land and have inherited several gifts because of that. We've inherited a landscape that was carefully stewarded and managed for thousands of years. From the nuts high in the trees to the mushrooms on the forest floor, the Abenaki gathered rather than foraged, ensuring food for their children and grandchildren. We also inherit a wisdom about the reciprocal relationship we have with the rest of the living world, which might help us all to combat consumption. This thought came to me while I was reading the book Braiding Sweetgrass, which if you haven't read, I really highly recommend. And I see some thumbs up going around, so yes. We're working on a big project at Norwich Historical Society for a summer exhibit. And my research has taken me back into the oldest store ledgers that we have in the collection. And in reading what people were buying in the stores, I noticed a lack of fresh foodstuffs. They bought spices and tea and sugar and coffee, items that couldn't be grown at home. And I noticed in the spring a lot of codfish, which would have arrived from the coast stiff and heavily salted. It reminded me that by March, April, May in early Norwich, there was little in the way of fresh food. So then I turned to our diary collections to see if anyone recorded what they were eating in the spring. The men never recorded the food, but the women did. And one diary, Ella Sargent's diary, who many of you are probably familiar with, does record the eating of spring greens. And I think it's significant that she mentions them because my bet is that she hadn't had any fresh greens since the fall frost. So here are some of her diary entries. She wrote on May 25th, 1908, I washed and did the work and dug some dandelions. And then the next day, I washed a little and cooked the greens. And then a few years later, she wrote this in May. Sun came out, warm this morning, but clouded up this afternoon and the wind was cold. I baked bread and a mince pie. After dinner, I got ready and started for Norwich. We went on Dan Courier's and dug some dandelion greens, went to the store and came home. The next day, she said, some cloudy and showery. I cooked beef and my dandelion greens and baked 2 apple pies and got beans ready to bake. She ate a lot of dried beans and those apple pies would have been made from the last of her dried apples. So when we head out in the woods to gather this spring, let's remember the Abenaki and remember Ella and all the other farm women of Norwich who took what they needed to feed their families, but also carefully stewarded the land for us. And one of the things I'm really excited about in this program is that we have the Conservation Commission and the Rec Department together, helping to remind us all about this careful stewardship of our land. And so I want to welcome Bree and Craig and turn it over to you guys. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Craig, did you want to say anything? Or?
I just want to say hello. Thanks for coming.
So most of the slideshow that I've contributed is from my own foraging excursions in Norwich, just out hiking. So most of the photos are taken by me and the uses and preparations. And Craig is our scientific specialist. He gives all of the history, the habitats, the other known associations, other ecology and natural history. So after each slide, we will give a little bit of time so that people can, or after I present my part, we'll give a little bit of time. If people wanted to talk, you can drop some questions or comments into the chat. So we will begin. I am Bree Swenson. I'm the rec director here in Norwich. I grew up in a small town, very similar to Norwich, with parents who encouraged my brothers and I to explore the woods and all of the outdoor spaces around us. We grew most of our food and fished what was in season. We foraged in the woods and on the seaside whenever possible. I still remember finding lawn strawberries and pulling mussels from the rocks, walking down to the shoreline after storms to pick sea clams for chowders, because they'd come right up on top of the sand, and picking berries in our backyard. And now with my own 3 children, I try to pass on my enthusiasm for foraging and respect for nature as much as I can. As Sarah noted, this presentation brings together conservation with Craig and recreation with me. I've always believed that the relationship between the two is extremely important, since the experiences that we give people through outdoor recreation can lead to a greater appreciation of and respect for our wild spaces. It can also encourage more people to be good stewards of the land. The slideshow contains photos of what I found here in Norwich, and following the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for all of you to share what you might have found as well, because we're pretty anxious to hear that. There'll also be an opportunity to sign up for a new program called Foraging Forays that will bring you into the woods and public parks to explore, with the hopes that we can harvest what we find, but I'm not going to be disclosing any known patches of ramps, fiddleheads, or any other items that are sensitive to overharvest. Please know that I am not promoting foraging for profit and harvesting on private land without permission. Every item I harvest has been shared with other residents of our town or eaten primarily by my own family. We only harvest as much as we consume, and we always keep sustainability and the health of the organism in mind. In Norwich, most landowners I've approached about entering their land to look for items have been really welcoming and encouraging. They've all been great. And it also helps to offer to share anything that you found, which I always do. The largest puffball, you'll see it at the end of the presentation, it was about 4 pounds, and it was found by my daughter, and it was gifted to her by the landowner, and we offered a bit of it to the landowner, and we only kept about 1/4 of it. The rest of it went to other foragers I knew in town. That's how I prefer to forage. I think being a responsible forager can maintain strong relationships, and it really gives you an opportunity to spread the idea of land stewardship to other people. So that is me. Craig, if you'd like to add anything else, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we can start.
Sure, I'll just say I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. I'm happy to be involved with this presentation. Also a big fan of braiding sweetgrass, and we'll mention in several slides places where you can give to the forest as well as take. In fact, in some of my research, I ran across a business that cultivates and sells bulbs of ramps to start your own patch. And actually in Wisconsin, where I grew up, a lot of the flora is the same there. So I'm familiar with the things from there, but I've been here for 25 years, foraging nuts and berries and mushrooms, greens. And with that, I'll bring up our presentation.
All right, foraging in the forests and fields of Norwich. All of these photos are, again, ones that I've taken. There are juvenile chicken of the woods, lion's mane, Concord grapes, lobster mushroom, aminated Jackson eye, lawn strawberry, my favorite, shaggy mane, and a puffball. So ramps or wild leeks. These are ones we find all over Norwich. I have definitely agreed with this first part that they're edible, but they have caused some stomach upset when they're eaten raw. I prefer them sauteed with just a little bit of salt and pepper. You can find them in swampy areas in the forest. When you're harvesting them, though, you have to be very careful with ramps to preserve the patch. So my rule of thumb is I only take 1 to maybe 3 stems of the ramp from each clump that you find, by like a 1 by 1 foot area. So this patch of ramps probably came from, I don't know, one of the larger areas that I know of down in Norwich. And I try not to, I try to break off right where the ground meets. just to make sure that I never take any of the bulb. And then when I'm preparing them, I peel the outer thin layer from the white stem and I just saute them. But a lot of people just use them in place of scallions when they're cooking. I think they're wonderful. I think they're not as strong as a leek, even though I love a leek, and just kind of a mix between garlic and onions. Like, does anybody have any questions about ramps? I think Sarah's saying to put that in the chat. Nope. All right, Craig, I think you can move on. So fiddleheads. Oh,
Hang on one second, Bree.
I
you
saw
do
that.
have
Yep,
a
go ahead.
question. Yes, the presentation will be sent out afterwards.
You want to go back to the false hellebore?
And AJ, do you have a question you wanted to ask?
Hi, sorry, I don't know. I don't know why I'm not visible, but it's okay if I'm not. It's Antoinette Jacobson. So
Because your video is.
oh, it's because I haven't started the video. So do you, with the ramps, she doesn't cut the bulb. She doesn't pull out the bulb. The bulbs are best stayed in the ground.
Yes,
Ah,
absolutely.
okay. All
Yeah.
right, thank you. That's good advice.
And I do have to say that we made the decision that I was not going to talk about any of the lookalikes that could harm anybody, just because I really don't want to cause any confusion. I'm happy to have people email me about those later and I can help out with that and give some references, but we're extremely careful about, you're not going to see, you know, a false chanterelle, like a jack-o'-lantern on the same screen that you're going to see a true chanterelle. Not here, but I am happy to help you.
So not confusing.
Just not to confuse people. Mhm.
So I don't know why this isn't on.
What is Saturday? Okay. All right. I will tell you, when you are looking for wild leeks, what I'm saying is I'm not going to talk about wild hellebore or lily the valley. When I am looking for wild leeks, you are looking for a tall plant. It's usually about 5 or 6 inches from the ground. It looks exactly like you see in the picture back there. Craig, do you want to go back there? And it's kind of, there you go, or fiddleheads. They grow in clumps. They grow in usually large patches in the forest, or, you know, in swampier areas near the forest. And when you pull them out of the ground, they smell very much like a leek. The way that I've always identified them is pulling them out, smelling them, making sure they smell like it. But I've been harvesting them for a while as well.
A lot of the patches I run across are stream side
Yeah.
in soils that are richer, a lot of maple trees.
Mm. Craig, did you want to go to fiddleheads?
Yep.
Okay. All right, fiddleheads. They are in the bowl there in the front. Those are being washed. The fiddleheads, I've actually found fiddleheads pretty often near the ramps. When they're larger outside of the fiddlehead season, they are around here generally ostrich fern, which are about 4 feet tall. So then whenever I've seen ostrich ferns, I've gone back in the spring and found the fiddleheads after. Fiddleheads also grow in clumps. You want to get them as soon as they're up from the ground, but not so tall that the complete paper covering has come off and they've started to unfurl. So the ones that you see in the bowl there are just perfect. Again, you're going to see a clump of about 5 to 6 in a clump, and I would take 2 to 3 just to make sure that they can keep on growing and stay healthy. For fiddleheads, they really just taste like asparagus, but I've seen some books where they say to eat them as a trail snack. I've never actually done that, and I know that they've caused some pretty serious intestinal issues when they are eaten raw. So I've always blanched them after shaking off the paper covering and then cooking them like asparagus or putting them in a salad. And this bowl of fiddleheads was from the same patch as those ramps. It was a pretty large patch. It was probably about a 1/4 acre in total, right stream side in the forest in a little swampy area. And are there any questions about ramps? Or if there are no questions, we can just go through and then you can ask questions at the end as well. Sarah, is that what you're going to recommend?
I think you should do that, and I'll
I do
interrupt
too.
you if I see a question come up.
That's what, okay, great. All right. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay here. So Japanese knotweed. So that is medicinal and edible. I've heard but not done it myself that it has been used as a to alleviate the symptoms of Lyme disease. I have not had Lyme disease. I don't know how that is prepared. That is something I've heard. So what I have seen is people cooking it like asparagus, but only when it comes up from the ground at first. So this first picture here, that's about as tall as you want to be able to let it get before you cut it off from the bottom and prepare it either as asparagus or like rhubarb in pies and jams with usually a little bit extra sugar. It's not as strong as rhubarb, but it's a good way to get rid of an invasive or help with invasives. Again, just about the same areas, and most of these are the same time of year. So let's say late May, early June, you're going to find it in the same type of location that you'd find the ramps and the fiddleheads. And Craig, I think Craig's moving on to dandelion, correct? All right, dandelion. Dandelion is one of my favorites, and Sarah's mentioned it in her finding there. This, I love dandelion. So dandelion, I know it can be used in tea. I haven't done that. I have used it for dyeing. Dandelion salad is wonderful. The fact that you can find it pretty much anywhere is great. I've made dandelion wine with some champagne yeast and sugar. That's really labor intensive, but it's a good use of it. The cooked greens and in salads are my favorites, and we'll have a list of recipes for this one added later on after this talk here. To prepare dandelion, I'm sorry, that part is not on here anymore. I would pull the plant out and then completely soak it in cold water because there's an awful lot of dirt that gets trapped in those leaves, and then prepare it in the salad or cooked greens. That slide is not. And dandelion, obviously you find it anywhere. I wouldn't pick it roadside like anything here, and free of pesticides, obviously. So open lawns, pretty much anywhere. Garlic mustard. So our outdoor coordinator at the school here, I don't know if she's on here, but we are always on garlic mustard pulls, and knowing that we can eat it, I think is just fantastic. So garlic mustard pesto is really, really popular. This is one, because it's an invasive, you can just pull the entire plant, unless you really love garlic mustard and you want to let it keep on growing. I would just pull that whole plant. You can strip it down and take the leaves, wash the leaves, turn it into a pesto, add it into like a seasoning on your salad, and then the stems can be used as a garlic scape. And I've not heard anything bad about it. I've just told Sarah and Craig that I found an entire book on how to prepare garlic mustard. It is also found, well, it's almost found, you know, throughout the entire summer that I know that you can eat it. I know Lindsay, our outdoor coordinator who also lives here in Norwich from the school, she always says to pick it when it has still some buds on it, but does have the flowers open. She believes that it tastes best then, and I'm going to believe her. I've only had it with her. So.
Hey, Bree, we have a question from Sally who's asking, and I think this applies to garlic mustard too. If you harvest the knotweed shoot, does it help with controlling the spread?
Craig, do you want to help answer that one? Because I think we I actually served on the Conservation Commission with Craig, and I know that we had a whole talk on controlling knotweed and how to do it. And I don't think it does help control the knotweed. It's pretty hard to control the knotweed, but
we'll have to forage it very intensively to make that be a control measure, because it spreads so much by extensive roots underground. Those roots can go all the way to the other side of the stream, underneath the stream, and pop up. Yeah. They're just really extensive root systems that'll just keep feeding back to the plant, no matter how many times you cut off the little stalk in the spring. It'd be fun to try, pick a patch that we harvest as much as we can, as often as we can, and see.
My understanding is that if you cut it back every year for 4 or 5 years, you can actually really decrease the amount and maybe eliminate it.
Yeah, the Lime Conservation Commission was implementing one of those strategies. I believe it was every 4 years and every 6 years. It's like a 4-6-10 strategy. That would definitely be interesting to find if that's been working. Craig, we were moving on to morels. Oh, morels are all over Norwich. It's crazy the amount of morels people tell me about. I've only found the ones in my hand right there. Those were found on a walk with my little brother who was visiting, and he just happened to come up to me and say, "Hey, don't you like these?" It was crazy. And I was like, I've never found morels in Norwich, but he found these enormous ones right on the trail side. They're obviously far past when I would ever want to eat them. When you harvest morels, at least this variety, I cross-sectioned them, make sure that it was hollow in the middle. These were in a grove of hemlocks right next to a pretty popular trail. And there were no bugs in them. So I washed and dehydrated these, and I will be using them in a soup later after rehydrating them. I know that black morels are pretty popular in the orchards in Norwich. I know at least one person who goes out and finds them in my friend's orchard patch pretty confidently every year. Craig has also found that white morels are prevalent in Norwich, but I've never found those. I do think it's great that they just kind of pop up in places I don't expect them, but I've heard a lot of stories about morels in Norwich. Craig is moving correctly to chanterelles. All right, these chanterelles were found in a camp, one of the Norwich rec camps. We encourage kids to show me what they find, and then we try to identify them together. Morels are found in quite a few of the public trails and park area. I mean, chanterelles are found in a lot of the public trails and parks here. These were found pretty close to where my office is right now, and we have a lot of fun telling the kids the difference between them when we're looking for a chanterelle and trying to identify it as opposed to anything else is if you break it open and it looks like string cheese. So This is a really fun one to find with kids because they love to look for the string cheese. They taste wonderful. They're kind of a really light mushroom taste. They take really well to sauces. And they have a good way to ID them is what you can see on this photo is what are called false gills. So they're gills, it's a gill pattern that connects into the stem instead of stopping at the top of the mushroom, like right under the cap. If it stops under the cap, that's not a chanterelle. That could be a jack-o'-lantern. And again, I'm sorry, I know I sound hesitant, and that's because I'm not supposed to talk about the ones that could hurt you. So these are true chanterelles with false gills, which is a good rule of thumb. False gills, and when you open them, they look like string cheese, and they are absolutely delicious.
This is the one fungus on our list that is also really interesting as food for thought, because fungi have mastered evolutionarily being decomposers. They're so important in recycling in the forest and doing a lot of decomposition on wood and organic matter in the soil, and even trees that have just died or not quite dead. This is one that is a mycorrhizal fungus that is in a tight mutualism with tree roots. It uptakes nutrients for the tree in exchange for sugars. And there are other edible fungi that are mycorrhizal fungi, but this is the only one in the slideshow today.
But that does bring us to another one that lives on some dead material in the forest right next to the chanterelles, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That brings us to oyster mushrooms, which are one of the mushrooms that when I'm running or hiking through the forest, I can smell it. And once you get used to what it smells like, you can too. It's a really beautiful, strong mushroom odor. They grow in shelves. Unfortunately, we only have a gill shot here. But we have a question. Can you harvest as many mushrooms as you find? I personally only harvest what we are going to eat when at all possible. And that is not always, I don't think I've ever harvested everything. I've always tried to leave some because there are a lot of forages around here. And sometimes I like to share and let them go and explore and find them themselves. But I also would never, when I am harvesting, I am very careful not to, like this one here, I pick them from the trees instead of pulling them out, kind of roll them off so that you're also not damaging any part of the organism itself. You're just taking the fruiting body. So this oyster was found in October, actually. This was a great late mushroom. It was found during another class, actually. I went out with a teacher and I gifted it to her because we found it on public land and we identified it together, and she took it home and she ate it. I personally think that they are fantastic in stir fries. They're pretty strong. They're not going to kind of melt on you. And they don't have a particularly meaty texture, but what did Sarah? Oh, sorry, Sarah just asked me a question. So they do take to sauces, but they don't have a huge overpowering taste to them. I think they're pretty good. Sarah was asking if I had talked about the different times of years for the other mushrooms, and I'm happy to go back to do that after for any of the ones I didn't mention. The next one is my absolute favorite, other than puffball, chicken of the woods, which shockingly actually tastes like chicken, which I did not believe. I am, I was a vegan for a long time. I was a vegetarian. I am now an omnivore, and I was shocked when I ate chicken of the woods, and it actually had the same kind of structure of chicken. So there was actually a time when I cooked the chicken of the woods at the same time I made some regular chicken nuggets, and my own husband couldn't tell the difference. It's a great mushroom. I love it. And so this one is found on the same tree every year. It is a gorgeous specimen. Usually for the person who was asking if you would take the entire mushroom, this is definitely not one I would take all of. Each one of these mushroom shelves is about twice the size of my hand. They were enormous, and they're very good. But I would share the location with somebody I trusted to not over harvest this mushroom. So this one, it is in late summer, early fall. I normally start looking for chicken of the woods in maybe late August. I know that I can definitely find them in September, maybe even as late as October. They grow really fast. So that first slide that you saw with kind of all of those photos together, what you saw was that little tiny block of a juvenile chicken of the woods. That the next day, it was like maybe a couple days ready from harvesting. It just grows so fast. And then they're gone. I mean, they get eaten by the bugs and everything else that's also in that tree. So when you do pick them, I would definitely brush them, cut them laterally, look for any kind of things that you don't want to be eating in there. Don't soak them because they will take on a lot of that water, but I would, dress them like in an egg wash, breadcrumbs, tempura batter. And I have a couple of recipes that I'll share later with that chicken of the woods risotto, which was my favorite. And my kids loved the chicken of the woods nuggets. Craig, do you have anything about this?
Well, you're mentioning getting them soon enough before the bugs get going on them.
Yeah.
Made me realize in other species associations for the mushrooms, I could have almost always listed just how much slugs love mushrooms.
That's actually why we didn't include the red wine cap, because all of the wine caps that I found, I'd find them in one day and then they were half eaten by slugs. So all of my photos of wine caps have slugs in them. They're not the most appetizing, but they're a nice mushroom. Oh, the next one. The next one is a really fun mushroom because it's actually one of two mushrooms. It's either Russula or a lactaris. And that, what you see, the red on the outside is actually a parasite. So it's one of two mushrooms that have had a parasite invade, and it turns it into a really delicious specimen. So when you find these lobster mushrooms, they're not hard to find, but they're hard to realize what they are because they look like little bags, maybe litter on the ground. They just kind of look like they're crumpled up in kind of an amber color. One of the trails right outside of, or right off of Beaver Meadow, I can tell you, has an awful lot of these, and they grow right trail side. I've been running and just said, what is that on the trail side, and gone and picked up like 6 of them. They have a meatier texture and they do taste like seafood. I think that they're pretty good. Again, I would check them because these grow on the ground. I definitely check them for insects before you wash them. And sorry, there's another question in the chat. I think that's for you, Craig. A tree that is dying or decaying?
Yeah.
A sensing tree?
Senescent. I
Yes.
may have had it spelled incorrectly on the slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is one that one of the classes at the Marion Cross School found on a school trip. And one of the kids let me know about it. I went back out, talked to their outdoor instructor, made sure it was on public land before I went to pick this one. This is a boar's head tooth mushroom. It is great. So the difference between this and a lion's mane is that the lion's mane mushroom grows in one big ball. And it looks like somebody hit a snowball with a tree and it started melting off. A bear's head tooth mushroom is this, and it looks like it has little branches that just are kind of falling off of the tree, like little fronds coming down off the tree. And when you cut it, it kind of looks like a cauliflower structure on the inside, which is different than the lion's mane, which looks like a solid ball with strands coming down from it. Both of them taste like seafood. I really loved the boar's head tooth. It tastes so much like shrimp that I put it in a scampi, and it was fantastic. I did have to wash it quite a bit. just to make sure that I had gotten any of the material that kind of gets stuck on the inside out of it. Craig, did you have anything to say about this one? I thought you had, but
No, I was curious, is that on a cherry tree?
actually it is. So this was I don't know. I can tell you it was near Burton Woods. So yeah, it was a cherry tree. Shaggy manes. So shaggy manes are all over Norwich. When you're driving, you see them, they pop up in one day and then they're gone. If you don't get them within 24 hours of them popping up from your lawn, they really do kind of dissolve into what you see on that second one from the left. What was the other? They called lawyer's wigs because they start curling up like that and they look like an old-fashioned lawyer's wig. They're really kind of neat. So with these, I would cut them right in half. I haven't had a problem with them taking on bugs just because they come up and then they're gone. You know, they're just kind of magical. They pop up, you pick them and you just either batter them or turn them into like a vegetarian burger, like maybe chop them up and add like egg and some other flour and things that you would prepare with them. And yes, Craig, looking at that. Pastures and lawns. That's the only place I've ever seen them. So, and oh, sorry, Sarah. Yeah, we found that one in October as well. And this is me with the largest puffball I have ever found. It was found in the middle of town. And my daughter spotted it and thought that somebody left a ball on their lawn, but my kids really love foraging. And she said, I'm actually pretty sure that's a puffball. And so she went back and asked the homeowner if she could harvest it. And he said, actually, I've been wondering what to do with that thing. And he let her have it. We took it home, we cut it in half. Perfect. There's no spots in there, no bugs, no softness on the outside. We cut it just like that. I sectioned it into 8 pieces, called people I know who really love foraging and mushrooms, passed those out. We peeled it and battered it. And that one was turned into puffball Parmesan, which was just turning like a chicken cutlet. And then with pesto and some cheese and tomato sauce. My kids love puffball. This is their favorite mushroom, but really it kind of takes any taste. I know a lot of people who have turned them into French toast. I haven't tried that yet. I'm not big on sweets, but my kids love them as puffball fries. Puffball Parmesan was very popular. And the texture to them is nothing like meat. It's more like tofu. And you just find those on lawns. They just pop up again very quickly, just like the shaggy manes. This one was found late October, actually. I was not expecting to find this one. But it was great. This is the person, the owner of this property is the person I ran into today. He was very excited to know that his puffball would be presented in a photo. So, Craig, any puffball knowledge?
No.
No? Don't kick them?
No, but I would be curious to see one that size when it gets to sporulating. And
yeah, it was actually about 4 pounds.
wow.
All right, Craig, I think that is the last slide, right?
Yeah, I'll put that first slide back up.
Okay. You're going through them. And we should mention, so those slides were actually in chronological order from when I found them. So they start in May and go all the way to October. And Sarah, can you figure, I can't unraise hands or call on people here, can I? I see it says there's a raised hand. But.
So Brendan, do you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That's Craig and Bree. This is a really great presentation. Thank you so much.
Yep.
So one of the things that I've often worried about is, you know, am I going to pick the wrong thing? And I've got an app on my phone, and I'm sure there's more than one. and you take photos and it tells you what the plant is, and it's really good. But I'm wondering, does it work for foraging species? Like, would it work for different mushrooms?
So I don't use an app. Are you using like iNaturalist or something?
It's called Picture This.
Okay, I know that one too. So with mushrooms, I actually belong to a Facebook group that's moderated by a pretty well-known mycologist. And so I send my photos to him to be positively identified by him and the rest of the community after I do my own research. I don't eat anything until it's been identified by me and a community of people who know a heck of a lot more than me.
Great
I
strategy.
don't trust apps because I think that sometimes you might not be taking, or the app might not be taking into consideration all of the variables that could make that not an edible mushroom or something that could be making you very sick. But there are some mushrooming groups around here. I have not found one for amateur foragers yet, though.
Right. Okay. Thanks. That's good advice.
Yep.
Great.
Do we have other questions? Feel free to raise your hand or put one in the chat. Here's one from
There you go.
Sunny. Do you advocate for taking spore prints of mushrooms for identification?
Hi, Sunny. Yes, absolutely. That is a bit more technical, and I am completely happy to help with spore printing. That's something I didn't want to get into here because we don't have a ton of time. But when you do get into foraging, and a lot of the books that you read when it comes to mushrooms, they will tell you to get a spore print. And I think it is pretty important because it helps. It's just another layer of identification to keep yourself safe, and really because it's interesting, right? So yeah, I do say spore printing is pretty important.
Bree, you want to mention how you do a spore print?
Yep. So you cut the mushroom, you take the cap off, and you lay it down on a piece of paper or on something absorbent like a paper towel, and then you'll take it off, usually about 24 hours, sometimes whatever it takes for the spores to fall down onto the paper, and then you'll see a pattern and a color. And the color and the pattern can help you identify what that mushroom is.
So Bree,
Yeah.
so you just talked about sort of the different layers of things to look at in identifying a mushroom. One is spore print. Could you just list out sort of like what's your little check off of things that
What I look for when I'm
look at
IDing
in
a
the
mushroom?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I look at where I found the mushroom. Did I find it on the ground? Did I find it on a tree? What time of year did I find the mushroom? Then I, obviously look at what the mushroom looks like, and then I will go to whatever book I have with me. Most of them are actually either it will go by, is it a guild mushroom? Is it not a guild mushroom? And you can look that way, or it will go by the color of the mushroom. It depends on what book I'm using at that time. So I go by the appearance, I go by where I found it. Sometimes I do go by smell because some of them do have, like when you get to the boletes, they'll start talking about the smell of the bolete. A lot of people say that you should put some in your mouth and spit it out. I don't do that. And then I will go to, from there, I go on to, if I find what I think is pretty close, I'm narrowing it down to 2 or 3 mushrooms. That's when I go to that Facebook group and the one person I do trust most of all to help me with an identification. And almost every time I'm told to do a spore print.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You see the question here that are most of Norwich's trails on public land?
Craig, what would you think? So a lot of them, I mean, we have fire district land, right? So we have a lot of trails on fire district land. We have some trails on town-owned land, but then we have some with multi-owners, right? We have a lot of multiple owners of trails with permissions given for passing through their land on that trail, which doesn't mean that you have permission to harvest on that land. So it is not that easy to tell when you're on public or private land, but there is a very helpful guide from the Norwich Trails Committee, which is a map that's right behind me here, and it tells you the ownership of the fire district lands and the town-owned lands. So you can pretty much guess your trails by that. You can also go to the Trails Committee, the Conservation Committee, or myself, and we can tell you what trails are on public land. and what trails are not on public land, and help you if you need to get permission for something.
Any other
Yay,
questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah
You're
provided the
welcome.
map. You can
Any other
also buy it at Dan and Witt's.
There you go. I don't see lots of other questions here tonight.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think we're all going to be ready to get away from the snow and get out in the woods and start looking. And maybe some of us will just be looking this year and others will be calling you.
Yeah,
But
I will say, like, I am always happy to take questions. I'm happy to bring people out with me, especially for things that I can't answer tonight. I'm happy to bring you with me and be able to give you a fuller explanation.
Can you put a link into the chat
Yeah.
box for your
Yeah.
upcoming foraging program so people can have that?
So that's actually not live yet. I have to still get
Okay.
a couple more permissions on that one. Martha had a question though. I saw Martha.
Well,
raise her hand.
it wasn't a question, it was a comment that I've always been told that if you're eating a mushroom that you've found, it's always good to just eat a little bit the first time, because a lot of people do have allergic reactions to things. So I just like to pass that along, that you don't want to go out and pick something, even if you can identify it correctly, and eat a lot of it the first time. You really should just take a little bit of it.
I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, but I think it's a good point to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I also only take a couple bites the first time.
All right, good.
I see Heidi's asking about a children's book. Yes, Mary Holland's Naturally Curious is the best children's foraging book I've ever read. I love it. My son brought it home from school one day, and just looking through it, and it's even great for adults, but it brings you through an entire year of being outdoors and what you find at that time, and it really encourages you to get outside and see what's out there. Even, you know, she might be talking about frogs and she gently mentions something else, and it gets you out there and helps with some identification.
The Norwich
Other
bookstore
than that, I'm
has
a Peterson person.
The Norwich bookstore has quite a collection of foraging books. I went over there to see if I could, you know, just see what they had. They had a dozen at least. So there's just lots of them on the shelves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really also depends what you're looking for, because I'd love to recommend more foraging books, but I have a lot of them. And I'm happy, you know, I'll put those on the Norwich Rec website, the ones that I have on my own bookshelf.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yep.
And we could send that list out, or that link, to everybody who's signed up for this program, so you can get that.
Great.
So we'll do that too.
Okay.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming to our final Discover Norwich program. I'm kind of sad that the 5 weeks are over, but we've gotten outside and we've met skiers and we've learned about some past history, and now we're ready for spring. And I think we're all having renewed appreciation for the incredible landscape that we live in here in this town. And thank you to both of you for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for coming. I hope you have a good night. And in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a program by the Historic Preservation Commission on the barns in Norwich and the big barn survey that's happened, which will be really interesting too. So keep an eye out on our e-news for that, and you'll see it. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you for such a clear presentation as people head out.
No, thank you. That was fun, actually.
Well, good. And now you've got all those slides ready to go for another time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right. I think I'm going to end the program, and just thanks again to everybody.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.